I would argue that Rusty Bowers is just one of the signs of hope in this document. I think there are a whole bunch of them in here. There are a lot of Republicans who would not stand for this. Yes, we understand they went along for the ride for too long. We get all that. But we're talking about this case and this moment in American history where, again, the power of this document is that it is effectively authored by the voices of Republicans, people alongside Donald Trump who stood up to him. Maybe not enough in the years preceding that, but in that moment, they told him no. And that's the basis of the case, is that he knew, because the people around him told him he lost the election, but he went ahead anyway and tried to overturn it.
Well, like Andrew Weissman said before, I mean, there's one of the things that jumped out at me. Two things jumped out at me. One, how desperate Donald Trump was to try anything and everything he could to seize power after he'd lost the election. But the second was, and I didn't know what to expect reading this, but going through the 45 pages to follow up on what Mike said, one Republican office holder after another Republican office holder, one Republican judge after another Republican judge, saying no. And it's spelled out here. We talked about it early at 6 o'clock hour. Donald Trump's vice president, senior leaders of Donald Trump's Justice Department, Donald Trump's director of national intelligence, Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security and Cybersecurity, calling it the most secure in American history, senior White House attorneys telling him no. You have absolutely no fraud here. Senior staffers on the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign, whose sole mission, as Jack Smith points out, was to get Donald Trump elected. And all of these people that I'm naming would have been far more powerful, far more wealthy in the future had Donald Trump won. Donald Trump, state legislators and officials, people who supported Trump through and through. And then, of course, state and federal courts. We talked about Rusty Bowers, the Speaker of the House. You can go to Georgia. And during the middle of Georgia, you actually had a senior campaign advisor emailing saying, listen, when our research and campaign team can't back up any of the claims made by our, quote, elite strike force legal team, you can see why we are 0-32 in cases. He goes on to write, hustle to help on all fronts. But it's tough to own any of this when it's all just conspiracy shit beamed down from the mothership, closed quote. You go to Georgia. You have Donald Trump lying on the telephone saying 5,000 dead people voted in Georgia. The Secretary of State of Georgia, a Republican, somebody who voted for Donald Trump. Well, Mr. President, the challenge you have is that your data is wrong. And then Donald Trump said there were thousands of out-of-state voters. And then the Georgia State Secretary of State's counsel refuted it, saying, we've been going through each of those as well, and those numbers that we've got that you were just saying, they're not accurate. In response to multiple other defendant allegations, the Georgia Secretary of State counsel told the defendant, Donald Trump, that the Georgia Bureau of Investigations examined all such claims and found no merit to them. We can go to the leaders, the Republican leaders of the House and the Senate that Donald Trump invited to the White House to browbeat them into doing. They went back to Michigan. And this is what the Michigan House Speaker wrote after it was all over. We diligently examined these reports of fraud to the best of our ability. I fought hard for President Trump. Nobody wanted him to win more than me. I think he's done an incredible job, but I love our republic, too. I can't fathom risking our norms, traditions, and institutions to pass a resolution retroactively changing the electors for Trump. I fear we'd lose our country, the Republican Michigan Speaker of the House said. I fear we'd lose our country forever. This truly would bring mutually assured destruction for every future election in regards to the Electoral College, and I can't stand for that. I won't stand for that. On December 27th, the defendant, Donald Trump, raised with the acting attorney general, an acting deputy attorney general, a specific fraud claim that there had been more voters in Wisconsin than actual people there. The acting deputy attorney general informed the defendant the claim was false. I can go on. Every state, Jonathan Lemire, every state. These are people, again, I'm looking through here. I'm trying to find the New York Times editorial writer whose editorial is in here, or the MSNBC primetime host, or member of the Young Marxist League of the Greater Manhattan area. I'm trying to find Democratic operatives. I'm trying to find woke warriors. I can't. You know why? They're all Trumpers. You go through here, this entire document is crammed like the January 6th documents and the reports. These are all Trumpers. And these are not just people that supported Donald Trump in 2016 and got disgusted and moved away. These are people that stayed with him through Charlottesville. These are people who stayed with him when he started using fascist language, telling people of color that were in Congress, go back to where you came from. These are people that stayed with him through 2 impeachments when he refused to give Ukraine defensive weapons unless he dug up dirt on Biden. These are
porn star payoffs.
These are people who stayed with him through illegal payoffs to porn stars. These are people who stayed with him even through the bitter end when he was pushing his Attorney General Bill Barr to arrest Joe Biden and his family 2 weeks before the presidential election. They all stayed with him. They're the ones who are testifying now against him because it was so blatant, it was so un-American, it was so treasonous. No Democrats here. All Trumpers.
The most powerful parts of the January 6th House committee was when it was Republicans, when it was Trumpers who were offering their testimony about what he did. The same is true here in this document. These are Republicans. These are diehard Republicans, diehard Trumpers. That is, these are Republicans who stood in the breach. They did the right thing, but some of them suffered real electoral consequences. We heard about Rusty Bowers. He got crushed in the Republican primary, trying to be House Speaker again in Arizona. Liz Cheney, Representative Cheney, was the star of the January 6 hearings. She got crushed in the Republican primary in the aftermath. Evidence is this is still Donald Trump's party. Are there exceptions? Yes. Brad Raffensperger won re-election as Georgia's Secretary of State. But what we're seeing here from these other candidates on the campaign trail, that includes Tim Scott, that includes Governor DeSantis, this includes just about all of them, save maybe Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson, they're all still towing the line. They're attacking the Department of Justice. And Donald Trump is the odds-on favorite to be the nominee again next year. Other indictments have only helped his poll numbers in the GOP primary. Of course, it could be a different story in the general election, which is going to be happening, Andrew Weissman, against the backdrop of, we think, this trial. And we heard from Trump's lawyers last night previewing what we think their defenses will be. The biggest part is simply, well, he believed that he won. He believed the election was stolen from him. And the indictment shows, otherwise, the evidence that people were telling him, sir, no, you lost. But that's going to be Trump's mindset. I won. So talk to us. Is that going to be potentially effective defense?
Well, let's see. The first thing that is going to be hard for him if he wants to make that claim is he would have to testify to his state of mind. And I think for the same reason that he did not testify in the E. Jean Carroll case, he did not come in and speak with us in the Mueller investigation. And I think any good defense lawyer will not want to put him on the stand. That will be a bloodbath if he actually takes the stand. Two, to Claire's point, that defense needs facts. There are so many facts listed in this indictment, and if there were facts to help support that subjective belief, you'd think we would have heard it, so many years later, and there still are no facts. And I do think that a court of law is where facts and law still matter. So I think those are two real problems with his mounting that type of defense, that he truly believed it. And then finally, if you look at the indictment, just think about the allegations of how many times he lied. If you believe this, why are you resorting to so many false statements with respect to even your own vice president? And for instance, on January 5th, when he issued a statement saying that the vice president agreed with him, that the vice president had the power to change the votes and to send this back to the states, when the vice president, as the indictment alleges, said that is the absolute opposite of what he was telling the president. So the series of lies that are listed in the indictment really belie any claim that he had that subjective belief. Finally, there is a law point, which is it's not entirely clear that for all of these charges, his subjective belief on that matters, because there's certain things you just cannot do, even if you believe you won. The way that you deal with that is go to court and you bring a case to show that there was fraud in the election. Well, he did that, and the indictment says that that is a lawful means to challenge the results. The problem is he lost, as Willie said, over 60 times. So once that's done, you don't get to take the law into your own hands, regardless of whether you are a foot soldier or the former president of the United States.
Andrew.